It'll let me know when we're live.
Live.
And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Paranormal Now. It's been a while since you've seen us. The train wrecks are over. We can tell everybody we've got it figured out going now into the rest of the year. My co-host, as always, with me is Crystal. Hello, Crystal. How you doing?
Hi, Dan. Hi, James.
And we've got James
Hello.
with us tonight. Now, I don't want to butcher his name. Is it SZUSKI?
Very close. It's
Zubski.
Shupski.
Shupski.
There you go.
Suvsky. All right. James is the chief operating officer of Margie's outdoor store located deep within the Columbia River Gorge in Washington State. Yes, I am reading this from a bio board over here. My printer doesn't work. In 2022, his store initiated a paranormal reporting program, which has now received well over 100 reports of strange activity in the Gorge area. James is a former volunteer, search and rescue EMT, a wildland firefighter, a mountain guide, and highly decorated U.S. Army infantry veteran. Thank you for your service, sir. He's earned a degree in communications from the Evergreen State College and has enjoyed a decade-long career in that field. He currently volunteers his time as leader of the Klickitat Ape Cat Research Team. I knew I was going to struggle through that, but I've heard some good things about this guy, and I actually have heard you on another podcast. Once I went looking into your bio a little further, and I went to your Facebook page. I'm like, I've heard him on a podcast. So I didn't quite catch your name, but I did catch a few excerpts, and I'm intrigued. Paranormal is right up our alley, James, and thank you so much for taking the time out to be with these kooky people way over here in Michigan. But I would almost attribute, we don't have as much forest land as you do, but I would attribute parts of Gaylord in northern Michigan and UP look it's eerily similar to some of the areas over there in Washington, just in like rainfall and some of the things that go on because we're surrounded by water. But what kind of strange things? Let's just open this up. I mean, you asked about what the audience might like, and I'm going to tell everybody that we're going to try to cover some different things here because being that you're in Washington, I have a strange suspicion there might be a mention of maybe some Squatch stuff. Okay. But, there could be some ghostly things as well because the natives have spoke for years over there. As far as the paranormal goes in that respect too. So let's start off to how this all started and how you got to run the store and where this thing is going. How did this happen?
Dan and Crystal, thanks for having me on tonight.
No worries.
So I came out I'm originally from Ohio, so we're basically neighbors growing up.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm very familiar with the types of forests and wilderness areas out in that stretch of the woods. But in the late 80s, I joined the Army, and I was stationed at Fort Lewis, which is about 200 miles north of here, and really fell in love with the Northwest. And on my leave time, me and my Army buddies, we'd come down to the gorge and go adventuring. And so, like I said, that was 30 years ago, even more now. And then about 2 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away. And Margie had a couple of businesses located in the Columbia River Gorge in a little town called Bingen. And when she passed away, I raised my hand to take on the family businesses. One of them was a store that was kind of struggling. And with my outdoor experience, it seemed to make sense to convert that into like an outdoor adventure store. It wasn't long before we changed the format that folks started coming in and telling us lots of really strange stories. These were just spontaneous kind of things going on. We started hearing a lot of Sasquatch stories and a lot of UFO stories.
Right.
And I thought this was fascinating. And the strange thing is that I was kind of getting the idea that pretty much everyone who lives here has seen Sasquatch or knows someone who's seen Sasquatch. It's like kind of like seeing a bear. So I put up a big sign in the window and it said, "File your paranormal reports here." And I instructed our staff. I said, "Listen, when people come in, we're going to treat them with the utmost respect. Having been a soldier and had some strange experiences myself and knowing what it's like, especially with some of my veteran buddies who have been through really unusual experiences. When you try to explain them to somebody and they don't take you seriously, it's very disheartening. And so
Yeah.
we had a very clear vision from the very beginning, and it was going to be, we'll treat these people with respect. We'll treat them like adults. We'll ask intelligent follow-up questions. We won't try to insert our version of reality upon their experience. And let's see what happens. And I really wasn't sure where it was going to go or what was going to become of it. And so we have a forum in the store. And now it's been a year and a half, and we've had close to, Jesus, coming up on 100 and nearly 170 reports that people have filed. So, yeah. And so what's really clear to me is that the Columbia River Gorge is an incredible hotspot for paranormal activity of all different types. And you had mentioned Sasquatch. We have a lot of UFO or UAP experiences out here. We have people have reported glowing orbs. We have reports of small humanoids that are perfectly formed humans that are 2 to 3 feet tall. And we've had spectral, ghostly apparitions have been reported. And the thing that really caught my attention, something I had never heard of before, was a creature we call the Klickitat ape cat. Now, my store is located in Klickitat County, and Klickitat is a Native American word. It's the name of one of the indigenous tribes that lived in the area. And this is a very mysterious Black Panther-like creature that has been seen prowling around Klickitat County. And so there's this really wide array of pretty much everything in the book. Now, of course, Washington State per capita has the highest number of UFO sightings anywhere in the United States. And Washington State is also considered the Bigfoot capital of the U.S. as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so these things are part of our heritage and who we are. But down here in the gorge, things are really, I think, intensified. There's a couple of reasons for that. Now, it might help, before I get into any of the details of these stories, to paint your listeners a picture of what the Columbia Gorge is. So the Columbia River is the second largest river in the United States. It is the largest river in North and South America that flows into the Pacific Ocean. And it flows directly through the Cascade Mountains. Now, the map behind me is a map that I drew because I'm kind of a Dungeons and Dragons and Tolkien nerd. And so I wanted to draw a map
Wow.
of.
I thought that was
of our-
professionally done. That looks
Yeah, I
great.
did too.
And what's neat about this map behind me is that not only does it show the gorge and some of the major features here, we've pinpointed where many of the paranormal reports have occurred in the gorge that have been reported in the store.
Okay.
So the Cascade Mountains are a vast wilderness. They start in southern British Columbia. They extend to northern California. The total land mass is about 80,000 square miles. For comparison, that is the size of the 10 smallest states in the country combined, or the entire island of Britain. So an enormous, enormous area, and it is some of the most rugged wilderness in the world. And so when people say, like, why hasn't anyone found Sasquatch? They have no idea of the scope and scale of just the wilderness we're talking about. So the Columbia River is the only sea level passage through those mountains. It's a navigable river, so barges and things like that travel on it. And you can kind of see in the map behind me, everything on the west side is green, everything on the east side is tan. And that's because the mountains form a rain shadow. And so everything to the west is a rainforest, Pacific Northwest rainforest, that sees over 100 inches of rain a year. Everything to the east is a desert that sees less than 10 inches of rain per year. Now, my house where I live is in Stevenson. I live on the wet side of the mountains. And I drive 25 minutes to my stores, and they're just at the edge of the desert. And in that drive, I drive literally from the rainforest to the desert. So it's a pretty diverse area. In
That's
the
a big
1980s, yeah, but it's stunningly beautiful.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the 1980s, the United States government designated the Columbia River Gorge as the first national scenic area. And what it does is it recognizes the incredible natural beauty out here, and it protects it from development. So just to give you a sense, from my store, within 40 miles of my store, there are 3 stratovolcanoes. So Mount Adams, which is a famous UFO hotspot, Mount
Oh
Hood,
yeah, very much so.
and Mount St. Helens, which famously erupted in the late 1980s.
Yep.
We have dozens and dozens of caves out here. We have the highest concentration of waterfalls anywhere in the United States. Some of them are over 600 feet tall. And the gorge itself is an 85-mile-long stretch along the river with steep canyon walls. And you can go from sea level to 3,000 feet in half a mile. And so it is one of the most incredibly beautiful and incredibly mysterious places in all of America, perhaps all of the world. Now, the story of the Columbia River Gorge starts 20 million years ago. That's when geologists estimate this river started flowing. And just for people who are familiar with energetic flows, imagine what it means for there to have an energy flowing in one direction for 20 million years. And it is an extremely powerful flow. In fact, there are 14 dams on the Columbia River, and they account for 44% of all the hydroelectric power in the United States. And so, you can talk about it from a woo-woo perspective. Oh, there's these mystical energy forces that are flowing through this river valley.
Right.
But on a very hardcore material engineering perspective, the energy of the Columbia River is literally captured by these dams and turned into a form of power or energy that we use every day, electricity.
Yeah.
And so the dams on the Columbia River can power a city the size of Seattle and 7 more of the same size. So just a vast amount of energy flowing through this area. So river is huge. It's a big part of the energetic story here. But then they think that 15 million years ago, this enormous fissure opened in the earth. It's 100 miles long. It's near the border of Idaho and Washington. And trillions of gallons of lava started spewing out of this thing. And so imagine like the Hawaiian Kilauea volcanoes, that lava that erupts out of there. It's that sort of ropey, spewy kind of lava.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly the kind of lava that's flowing out of here, but they estimate this to be 1,000 times greater in volume. And in some places, this lava filled up the river valleys 3 miles deep. If you spread out all the lava that erupted over the several million years, there's approximately, they estimate, 300 eruptive events. And if you spread that lava over the United States, it would bury the entire United States in 60 feet of lava. Well, yeah, so monumental. And so what you have to understand is that this lava flowed 300 miles from the Idaho border all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And when you look at like those famous sea stacks on the Oregon coast, that is lava that originated there over in Idaho. But like I said, there were 300 different flows, and they occurred over millions of years in time. And each one of these flows is now stacked up like a layer cake. And they have magnetic iron grains in them. And all of each layer, the magnetic grains are oriented in a different direction because they all cooled at different times. And as the Earth's magnetic pole wandered, the magnetism at the time that the lava cooled was captured. And so you've got this stack of rocks, and they all have different magnetic orientations to them. All right. So it's a very complicated magnetic story going on here. And in fact, when you look at official government maps, they explicitly state in bold pink letters, your magnetic compass readings will be off in this area. It is a known fact that this place is crazy in terms of how it's impacting electromagnetism.
Right.
And so then about 2 to 3 million years ago, the mountains started rising up. So you had this strong horizontal energy of the river interrupted by this gigantic mountain forming energies that are moving vertically through the land. And so you've got like Mount Rainier, which is 14,000 feet tall, Mount Adams, which is right above my head on the map there. It's around, I think that's close to 12. Mount Hood. These are all stratovolcanoes that are over 10,000 feet tall. And so again, you've got this really complicated story going on with these energies that are perpendicular, horizontal to the vertical. And then the story that a lot of people have heard about recently because of folks like Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock are these epic ice age floods. And so 15,000 years ago, between 15 and 12,000 years ago, these enormous floods ravaged across eastern Washington. And all that water stopped at the sort of the eastern edge of the gorge, a place called Wallula Gap. Now, to give your listeners a sense of the scale of these floods, so imagine all of the rivers on Earth combined flowing at one time. All right. So that volume of water times 10 is what flowed through the Columbia River Gorge. And at places, these floods were over 1,000 feet deep, and they're moving at 60 to 70 miles an hour. They're carrying enormous icebergs and boulders, and they're stripping all of the
all
loose
sorts of
rock off.
debris. Yeah, all sorts of debris too. Yeah.
And so what it did was it carved out the gorge, and it exposed all of these layers of different magnetically oriented rock. And so we've got these soaring columnar basalt cliffs, and it's created a landscape unlike any other in the world.
Well, it's a naturally polarized landscape, and that's why what you were describing. That's why you get what you get, from all of that.
Yep.
And not even to mention, aircraft still have issues out there too on occasion with certain devices. So it's strangeness, man.
Incredible strangeness. And so I just want to give your listeners a sense of like just what an unusual and astonishing place this is. And, as a lifelong adventurer, the opportunity to live down here was like,
how do you ever get bored? Yeah, it's crazy.
And just the other day I was driving home, and right now the gorge is just awash with wildflowers. We have what they call endemic species here. So there are species of wildflowers and animals that live here that live nowhere else in the world. And part of that is this complicated geology and geography creates these sort of biodiversity islands. And so things grow here that don't grow anywhere else. So that's sort of like setting the stage for what the kind of place that I'm talking about. We've got rainforests, we've got deserts, we've got caves, mountains, waterfalls, this enormous river, and then this really complicated electromagnetic story going on out here.
Yeah.
So, like I said,
I liked your first, one of your earlier comments already made that people, have said for years since I was a kid, not to jump ahead, but I was a kid, watching before the BFRO was ever started. And there were a lot of these people going out, adventurers who were going out. I can name names, we all know the names. And, the thing that they used to hear that back then in the 70s, even the late part of the 60s. And I think you answered it well, is that these people have no idea the vastness of the area of which you live, where you're at, that whole Northwest basin, all of it. There are places that human beings have not touched the ground or been in as far as we know. That this is how vast it is. You can see it from the air and think, how is that possible? Well, it is. It very much so is.
The gorge is just this very thin ribbon of humanity running through this landscape. We have maybe 70,000 people who live here. And, I said that the Cascades have approximately the same landmass as the 10 smallest states combined. Well, in those states, the average population density is approximately 4,000 people per square mile. Out here, it's 10 people per square mile.
Yeah.
And so like it is, we're, like I said, just maybe an hour from the store's an hour from Portland, Oregon. And so it's pretty quick. And once you get,
keep going. I'm sorry.
I hear you. But once you get, outside of this thin remnant of humanity, it gets rugged and desolate very quickly.
Right.
In fact, there's this area, it's right behind me here on the map, a place called Broke Leg Barrows. It's an 8,000-year-old lava bed. And as a search and rescue EMT, and as a soldier and as a wild and forest firefighter, I have traveled through every kind of terrain there is. Glaciers, jungles, deserts, forests, you name it. But Broke Leg Barrows is this old lava flow, and it is like I'm on a wheel, like in Lord of the Rings when Gimli says it's a impassable labyrinth of razor sharp rocks. That's exactly what this place is. And it is the size of the island of Manhattan, and it's 20 minutes from my house. And so like these places, as a search and rescue EMT, like we would often go on evidence searches. The team that I worked with, it was the team that originally found the Green River Killers victims and Ted
Oh,
Bundy's
yeah, yeah,
victims.
yeah. Yeah, that's right.
That's when I was up in King County. And it would take 30 of us a weekend to search an area 300 yards by 300 yards. And that's like right off the road. The notion that you would find, the remains of a creature in this wilderness, especially one that didn't want to be found or maybe had social ideas about how to dispose of dead bodies, it is ridiculous on its face to think that you could do that. And, instantly, once something dies in the rainforest, it starts decomposing. The bones change color, they change shape, they get dispersed. And so I am not at all shocked that there is no remains of a creature like a Bigfoot. But so, like I said, we've been receiving lots of interesting reports. And maybe it's helpful to sort of take them in groups. So there are phenomena that are in the sky. And we really have three type of phenomenon that are reported. In fact, I just got a report today about someone who had seen a UFO craft, right? And so we get reports of traditional UFO, now called UAP craft. Some of them are triangular in shape. We have a picture. In fact, maybe I can bring up on the screen right here. In early March, we got a photo sent to the store, and it's gotten to the point where people will stop me in the grocery store. I'm kind of becoming well known in the gorge as I'm having trouble with the technology here. Let's see if we can get it to work.
I know, we all love it.
And so people will come up to me, but this was actually one that would came through our website. So let's see here. What's the one that I want? All right, let's see if this. So yeah, here we go.
Now,
so this picture came into through our website.
Where did you say you were at again? That this is.
We are in Bingen, Washington.
I'm looking at
so
the map. I'm just looking at the map to kind of get an idea. Okay, I'm like that, man. I'm a weirdo. Sorry.
I hear you. I'm a sucker for maps myself. So yeah, we got someone wrote into our website. So margiesoutdoorstore.com. We have a paranormal reporting form there that people, we just put that online. A lot of people come into the store. We have a form that people fill out. Most people just prefer to give us an oral report of what they experienced. But this person had taken a picture from 11 miles away from this mountain. This is Underwood Mountain, which is about 3 miles from our store. And it appears to be a classic tic-tac shaped craft. And because I know the scale of these things, this would be an enormous vehicle if it's in fact a vehicle at all. Not the best quality picture, but there is no evidence of wings or rotors on it. And just about, like I said, 35 miles north of us is Mount Adams, which famously is a UFO hotspot. And so here, some of your listeners may have heard of ESETI Ranch. ESETI stands for Enlightened Contact with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And I think Jim Gilland has been up there for a couple of decades. And you can come to his place, and you can camp on his ranch there and watch UFOs fly around Mount Adams all night. Well, several years ago, and I guess people come from all over the world to see this, and many people come as skeptics and they leave believers. But a few years ago, they captured a picture of what they claimed to be a hangar door, a physical door that opened on one of the lower summits of the mountain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was watching something about that.
Mm-hmm. And
what
they
do you
report
think?
that they've seen.
Do you think it is?
Well, I have not seen this myself, and they say that this opens and closes, but we've had many folks come into the store and talk about things. Now,
right.
One time, an elderly gentleman came into the store, and I think one of the most fascinating things to me is like, these are everyday people coming into the store, and the reports they give often are really, I mean, outside of the astonishing nature of what they're talking about, it's a pretty, like, there's not an exciting story. Like this guy said, well, I want to talk to you about a portal I saw near Mount Adams. And I kind of jumped the gun. I said, oh, you mean like the hangar door? He said, nope, this was something floating in the air next to the summit of the mountain. And he looked at it and he said this, it was a circular hole in the sky, and the sky behind the hole looked different than the sky around the hole. And at first he thought there was something wrong with his eyes. And, he rubbed his eyes and checked it and looked at it several times. He got in his car and drove a distance, and it remained there. And so there's a couple of different things going on there. One is this idea that there's an actual physical hangar built into the mountain.
Yeah.
And the other one is that there's a portal off that was floating out to the side of the mountain. And on the topic of portals, we've had reports of portals even along the highways. There's an area called Lyle. It's maybe 15 minutes east of the store, the next town down from Bingen, Washington. And there's a tunnel, and we had a person come in and report that they saw what appeared to them to be a portal off the side of the road near that tunnel. So again, this very unusual phenomenon being reported. But we were talking about UFO. So we have people talking about traditional UFO craft, triangular shaped, cigar shaped, saucer shaped, tic tac shaped. And of course, the very first, the big story that set off UFOs, the flying saucer craze, was the Kenneth Arnold sighting in June 1947. Well, that happened. He was flying a private plane near Mount Rainier, and the craft that he saw flew past Mount Rainier south, and they headed towards Mount Adams. And so this is the mountain that they flew towards. So again, we've got this traditional UFO craft. We also have many, many reports of what some people call glowing orbs. And, I've seen these myself with my wife driving on Highway 14. And
Wow.
so some of these, let's see if I got.
Yeah.
So we've got reports of orbs, and those orbs are, let me see, I think I've got a picture of those two to share with you. So some of those are seen in the sky. Some of them are seen at the ground level. And we had a report. Let's see, can you see what's on the screen here?
Yeah.
So this is an artist rendition. A person went out to watch some meteor showers in an area called Beacon Rock. And Beacon Rock is the cold core of an ancient volcano. It's 850 feet tall. There's a really cool trail that's literally pinned to the side of the cliffs. It's got a railing and it's safe. I take my dog up there. It's one of my favorite morning hikes. But there's a field below it, and this person reported that they saw a glowing orb that split into 3 glowing orbs, and they got within 20 feet of them. And then he turned towards it, and then it disappeared into what he reported as a campfire-like shower of sparks, and the others disappeared at the same time. And so we've got these stories of glowing orbs out here. We have also reports of glowing orbs up in the forested areas as well. Interesting here at Beacon Rock, this is a state park, and I've talked to maintenance workers there who say that they've seen ghostly apparitions at some of the trailheads. So these are humanoid, slightly glowing figures. They don't respond to human voices when they're called out to, and they seem to wander off trail into the forest. So very unusual activity there. And then the third kind of aerial phenomenon that we get are what appear to be advanced military aircraft. And so we've had reports of black choppers that make no sound flying below the rims of the canyons in the area. We've also had reports of people who are hiking in the area, and a black SUV will pull up and guys will jump out and tell them they need to leave. So the whole area has got definitely strange things going on there. We think that the military, so obviously with 44% of the hydroelectric power here in the river, it's a main transportation route for barges, railroads, and vehicles, on roads. This is one of the most strategically important areas of America. Like in the Northwest, we see, choppers, regular choppers, and fighter jets flying to the gorge frequently because they're running, exercises. This is, you have to protect the dams and that kind of stuff. But about 100 miles upriver from us is the Hanford nuclear site. And so this was part of,
I hear bells. Bells.
Yep, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so this was part of the Manhattan Project back during World War II. And so everyone knows about Los Alamos, where the engineers were designing the bomb. But Hanford was arguably just as important as Los Alamos, because Hanford is where they actually created the plutonium that went into the first nuclear weapon ever detonated in the history of mankind. And then through the Cold War, they forged enough plutonium there to create 60,000 nuclear weapons. It's known as the Apocalypse Factory. And it is it was the very first. So it eventually became the Department of Energy. So famously, the show Stranger Things involved the Department of Energy lab. But back during the World War II, it had a number of different names that it went by. But it was a top secret site. And so Hanford, just so people understand, they commandeered an area of land half the size of Rhode Island at 600 square miles. It has 90 miles of river coastline of the Columbia River. And they chose the site because they literally borrowed energy from the Columbia River, from the hydroelectric dams, to alter the fabric reality and create elements that don't exist in nature. So, and in fact, even before the Kenneth Arnold saucer sightings, there are sightings of UFOs observing Hanford when it was getting spun up. Eventually, Hanford had over 9 nuclear reactors there. So a lot of weird things went on there, and we'll talk more about Hanford when we get into the Klickitat Ape Cat. But
yeah, you had a good segue there, because I was going to a couple of questions. The first was the hangar door thing. I'd seen a couple of different things on it, a small documentary, if you can call it that. And, I would, like you just jumped right into the military aspect. One of the first things I question is, well, maybe it's a door for one of our bases up there before I would jump to alien. I am all about the UFO thing, but I still got to ground myself. So the reason I said that is because I made a friend in Tucson, Arizona when I moved out there in 1986. And I want this to be known that I met a neighbor there. His name was Charles Richards. Now, he's since passed away. This guy retired as a brigadier general in the Air Force. The gentleman was one of the first SAT commanders throughout Arizona and your area where you're living. And so he would tell me, he's like, what are they going to do to me now? I'm 80 something years old. This guy had survived the Bataan Death March. I mean, just a great human being, wonderful man. He had a thing for younger women. He's probably got 100 kids everywhere. He's one of those guys. He's like, he was going to live life, but he would talk to me. We'd stay up late and drink together and have a lot of great conversations. And he brought up the area you're talking about. He goes, well, there's some things I can't tell you. I can tell you that we've got bases and things in different areas. I think, if people knew where we had some. Now, this is way before this became knowledge, which when I started hearing it, it blew my mind that Charles was right, because I just thought he was talking off the cuff of his head, And he did mention, he goes, well, wait till they find out that we've got some hidden submarine bases on the West Coast. And then you find out we got hidden submarine bases. And so you're just like, geez, I think this guy probably was high up. And he was just a great guy. So it verifies some of what you're saying. I mean, right off the bat. The first UFO reports, like I said, it doesn't take an investigative genius, as you said, to know all those facts and to put some of that stuff together and kind of point a finger and go, there's some things obviously going on, whether it be extraterrestrial and or both. You could convict somebody on less stuff as long as you have as much as you already have as far as reports and things that have gone on in history. And the military vibe, we know it's there. Come on, and you served in the military. I did a short stint, but the fact of the matter is, the government has been the worst liars from day one ever. And I think obviously there's probably a portion of that, but I am with you. I think because of, and I don't want to be long-winded here, but I think because of geographical things that you've laid out already, James, and things that I believe in, and water and quartz and all these things that we always theorized, a lot of us do in this field that take it serious. We think all of that has a factor in these, not so much super, paranormal, supernatural, but they're super normal, but they seem supernatural to us, right? Does that sound right?
Yeah, the way that, I sort of define paranormal, it's things that seem to defy the laws of nature as we
They do.
currently
They
understand them.
do. Yeah, they're out of logic. Yeah. Right.
And but what's astonishing is, like, when you look at the very earliest expressions of human thought, and I'm talking about 40,000-year-old cave paintings, we see things that are impossible. We see therianthrope creatures, so creatures that are half man, half animal. And in fact, the first figurine that was ever built, that was ever found, is found in a cave in Germany, and it depicts a humanoid with a lion's head. And so, as long as we have been human beings, we have been experiencing things like this that are outside of what we understand to be physically possible.
Right.
But you look at a guy like Ben Franklin, and what a whack job he must have seemed like. He's out flying a kite in a lightning storm with a key and a
yeah, as a kid, I could never understand. Like, what is this guy doing?
And if you were his neighbors, you're like, oh man, he's out there flying a kite. Like, here we go again.
Yeah.
But that's 1750s. And now here we are in the 2000s, and electricity powers our whole world. And back then it was utter sorcery. Yeah. And so, just because we don't understand it, whatever you think about what's going on with military revealing UFOs or UAPs, and having Congress mandating that the Pentagon now has response teams that investigate this stuff, and now NASA's gotten into the game. What has happened, whether any of that's true or another phase of misinformation or whatever, is that more and more people are coming forward and feeling comfortable telling their story. So the stigma is being reduced.
Yeah.
And that's what one of the biggest hidden gems of this whole project at the store, of taking these reports, since we had that firm conviction that we were going to believe the witness, that we weren't going to belittle people or make them feel stupid for reporting their experiences, we have become a safe place for people to talk about things. And so, of course, there are some folks that come in and have fun, and they're pretty easy to spot. And, as far as I'm concerned, no harm, no foul. I'm not a scientist. I'm not trying to, prove anything to anybody. But what we do look for are patterns. And we look for, what are the similarities? To us, like, Sasquatch is practically a neighbor. And we have folks that come in, people have brought in hair samples for me. They've described encountering them with young, and the difference between, the young have fur and the older ones have hair. We've had reports of pregnant ones, some that are 12 to 15 feet tall. And, there's many, in fact, there's an area, it's sort of right here above, maybe 12 miles from the store. The official name is the Monte Cristo Natural Preserve. All the locals call it Monster Mountain because there have been so many Sasquatch sightings out there, or encounters, whether it be rocks thrown or vocalizations, knocking of sticks. We've heard stories that people felt like they were surrounded by 4 distinct individuals that were having communications about the party that was there. Right. They could tell the different personalities of the different creatures, and one of them seemed older and grumpier. And
I imagine they're probably a lot like humans, that you got nice ones and some that aren't so nice,
Yeah, and all variety of colors of fur we have, or hair, I should say. There's one gentleman who lives maybe 7 miles from the store, and he believes that his property is sort of a pinch point where they come through. When I talk to him, he's convinced that these are biological creatures, like they're just normal creatures. But when pressed, he said they do seem to have the ability to teleport short distances. And so for him, this is like seeing, bear or cougar on his property. But he does report that they have this ability they can seem to move very, very quickly, like shockingly fast, and cover 50 yards at a time.
Yeah, I've heard the natives speak of that, and some other people believe that ethereal and a sort of parallel type individual, as it were, that they have the powers to do that. I'm not sure I'm ready to go there. Mm-hmm. But, you mentioned something that's of interest too, because again, you guys are getting the reports right there, and there's other people working around in areas and stuff. That I had the Olympic Project people on here last year, and it was a great talk. Jeff Meldrum, it was kind of like my bucket list because Jeff is,
Mhm.
I guess, the authoritarian on footprints. He knows what he's talking about. He can spot a fake, whatever. I think I disagreed with him, which I guess I'm okay to do that, right? I'm okay to
Yeah,
disagree with
well,
people.
what I love
And I
about it
was
is they're mysteries. They're still figuring it out.
we don't have to agree. And I just thought at one point when I brought up the whole, them following food sources and trails, because you have like the UFO community, Bigfoot community, paranormal, you have different sects of these researchers who never agree. If they do, there's always some debate. But I was a one that I still believe, just because I think there's been enough evidence put forward that in certain areas, I'm not saying all over the United States, just in certain areas where they've been reported, that they may be, a type of humanoid. I don't know so much about primate anymore. Again, I'm not the expert. I've only been following this since I've been 11 years old. I'm just saying. I think I've read everything that's been out there, and probably good, bad, and the ugly. But I'm a believer that they might follow certain trails to they move with the food, they move with the food source, because you imagine if some of them do stay around winter areas, they already know where to get their food sources in. Like your area, it's abundant if you know what you're doing and where to look, right?
Like
Because they've been living there for thousands of years.
We
Parts
have
of
heard
Native
stories that,
Americans.
Yeah. What do you
yeah,
think about that?
well, there are reports that they have treaties with the Native Americans about
Yeah.
mushroom picking grounds, berry picking grounds, and
Yeah.
salmon hunting grounds. And
Yeah.
so,
Right.
and when you look at the stories from the Native Americans, and I've only been here a couple of years, and I'm working my way into trust with the Native American community here, which rightfully so. I wouldn't expect them to embrace me or share their secrets with me right out of the gate. And so I've been sort of, doing my book research as best as possible and listening to the stories. And,
Right.
uh, you know, um, but it's clear that there are a long oral history of encounters with non-human beings out here.
Yes, sir.
And so you either say, well, these people are idiots and liars, which I think is offensive and inappropriate to go there. To me,
It
like,
is. Yeah.
so much of the naysayer community is, to me, like know-it-all teenagers. There's a sort of arrogance and um and like when you look at societies, like it's the elites, it's the best and the brightest that are willing to entertain paranormal things. In traditional cultures, it's the shaman. These are the most forward thinkers. In ancient Egypt, it was the frickin' pharaohs, right? Like
Yeah.
these were the
Yeah.
people who were at the pinnacle of society, who were looking at these mysteries. And even now, our smartest scientists are looking at it seriously. And this the Ben Franklins, it's the Leonardo da Vinci's. Then you've got the masses, idiots like me, who have a sense that there's something out there. And intuitively, we know that there's more to the world than just this physical things banging around. And then there's that very thin strata of folks with their arms folded who think they know everything. And
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
approach is sort of like, I think it's much more humble and wise to say science has brought us a lot of great information about how the physical world works, but we don't know everything yet. And I
Oh.
see a lot of these guys saying, well, we know everything
You
and you're just wrong.
you and I are going
And
to be
so,
friends. Yeah, we're going to be friends. I'm the same way, man. I hear you, brother. I tell them too, they don't have all the answers. They know they don't. And
yeah,
unfortunately, they've created their own stigma and religion based on they
yeah,
don't want to listen or move forward. But you made a very good point about that figurine found, which goes into both the Bigfoot, Squatch, whatever the names are. There's so many of them.
mhm,
Along with UFO, ghost phenomenon, and other things, they are in every culture across every continent on this planet, and we have proof of that. So it can't be this crazy mass hysteria thing that they came up with,
yeah.
in the psychological field a couple of years back. That's just nonsense.
Well,
Those
not only
people,
that, what's crazy about that theory is that in order for that to be true, like if humans get a certain stimulus and then they all perceive the same thing, then there must be some evolutionary advantage to that. Like that doesn't happen by accident biologically. So if you're going to follow their own rules about how evolution works, you can't have a stimulus evoking a response across a broad population unless that response has an evolutionary survival value that aids in reproduction and the propagation of the species. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Exactly. And the other parts of that puzzle is too, we didn't have the same information age. So how in the world does that ever, it would never piece together in the way that they want you to believe it. So, you know, I'm a guy who thinks that, you know, that they're very intelligent humanoids. Okay. I'm just going to say humanoids. They know how to avoid us. They stay the hell away from us, which they're very smart to do. I mean, look at us. We're horrible as people.
I will tell you what,
you know,
I was an infantry soldier and I was trained how to hide in the woods. And, you know, basic training, we spend probably a week on camouflage techniques. And then you go and you spend, you know, when you're out in the field, you practice it. But literally an entire platoon of men could hide and you could stand 2 feet away from us and you would not know where we were. And we don't even live in the woods. Like we just work there. Right. And so for a creature
I don't live here. I just work there, man.
and so the camouflaging capacity of an intelligent being that lives in the forest its whole life and its survival depends on being able to stay hidden. Like that is, to me, like, again, what you're talking about are people who have no conception of like what it means to actually do these things. And you know, with the experience that I've had with the military and search and rescue and all the other things, you know, and even like a wild and forest firefighter, like you really have to know your shit because you are in some of the most rugged areas in an inherently dangerous situation.
And Mother Nature will take you quick.
And so, and most of these people who brush things aside with the wave of a hand, oh, it's just you know, people didn't see what they think they saw, or you know, we should have found it by now. Just have no clue of what it means to stand on the ground and actually physically try to accomplish these things that they're talking about.
None whatsoever. A majority of them nowadays are all doing this. You know, they're all doing this number. The other part you mentioned too, you know, is why haven't we found bodies? It's like talk to some hunters, talk to military veterans like yourself. You know, if this is a smart species, obviously they are, as I pointed out. They are either disposing of their own dead or they go off somewhere else, you know, when they know they're dying. But, you know, if you leave your carcass out in wilderness like yours, even here in Michigan, you know, most of nature is going to eat that. That's why it's hard to find even remains after murders. If you do years later, you're lucky. You're lucky if you get a fraction of a skull. If you do get a skull, very lucky. Because nature takes it back, guys. Nature takes it back. I've seen plenty of dead deer. You're right, but you know what? They're off on the side of the road because some nitwit hit them.
You don't see predators. You don't see apex predators.
No, I've been out hunting with a friend. I never saw deer bones anywhere. I might come across a dead turkey or something, which is kind of odd because coyotes are eating them. But you know, it stands to reason. I think you're making a lot of good sense, and I'm not frustrated with it, but that's just what we have to weed through, like having you on the show to talk about it and just kind of bring up some of the better points, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, and so this landscape has been exposed to like truly epic traumas, you know, like with the fires and the floods and all the things that happened here. And, you know, in some esoteric traditions, they talk about as above, so below. So if you imagine there's the physical plane, then the, you know, etheric plane, the astral plane, the mental plane, spiritual plane, like anything that's happening in one plane is mirrored to some degree in the other planes of existence. And if you were to say, well, okay, well, let's theorize, let's entertain the idea that there are creatures that live in the etheric plane, and they can sometimes pass into our world. I believe I'm coming to understand that it may be that the intense traumas that have happened to this landscape have thinned the veil between those two realms of existence. And it's easier for things to slip into our world, the physical world that our everyday experience. Yeah. And it's also easier for us to unknowingly stumble into that world. And, I've had experiences out here. We've had folks talk about lost time and other,
Yeah.
phenomenon like that. And there are some areas that are definitely standing on the lava beds that were scoured by the floods. And you get the sense that, like, I am right now, like, especially at sunrise or sunset, like, there is you get the incredible intuitive feeling
You
that
feel it.
you're peering into another world. And people who are not even very spiritually sensitive, you come to the gorge and you feel the energy flowing through
Yeah.
this space. Like, it is unavoidable. If you just calm your mind for a minute and be still, you feel it. And so, yeah, there's so many things. So we talked about Bigfoot, the UFO UAP phenomenon, but the one that really kind of opened my eyes was a creature we call the Klickitat ape cat. And so the high level is that it's an enormous Black Panther-like creature, and it seems to have some supernatural characteristics. For instance, it interferes with electromagnetic devices, compasses, batteries, things like that. So the very first time that I heard about this, a gentleman came into the store. He's a local. It was just before we closed, and it took him 45 minutes to work up the courage to tell me the story. And he had been friends. His family was friends with my mother-in-law, and he said that he was up near Buck Creek, about 4 miles from the store, and he was orienteering, map and compass kind of stuff. His compass needle started spinning in a weird way. And then he looked up and across the creek, he saw this enormous Black Panther creature. So it was a big cat. He said that it had jet black fur. The fur was 4 to 5 inches long. It had a long black tail. It was very muscular. And he was describing it to me, and I was like, well, first of all, there's a couple of flags going off in my head. We, of course, have cougar out here.
Yeah.
And but cougar are tan, and when they get dark colored, they turn to more of a reddish color. But no scientist has ever verified that there are black cougars. In fact, many of them say that's genetically impossible for
Right.
cougars to be melanistically black. And so that's a flag for me. And then he also said that it stood 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Now that is a big flag, because tigers aren't that big, right? And so we're talking about an animal that is larger than the largest known cat on the planet. And so, again, that's in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is an extraordinary experience this person had. And then he said, James, the strangest thing is that it had a face that looked like a monkey. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it had intelligent ape-like eyes, and other primate features. And when I looked at it, and in other reports I've heard since then, people describe it as its face is flattened. So, like, you think of a German Shepherd with a long snout, and then you think of a pug dog with a short snout. And so within the dog family, you can have varying different, snout lengths. And so this apparently has a very, very short snout, gives it the appearance of an ape or a monkey. And so I was just astonished by this tale. He gave me a few more details, which I don't reveal in interviews, because if other people talk about it, I want to see if there's, some cross-referencing there.
Right.
And so the next day I was talking to my employees, and I said, I got this really amazing report last night. And one of my employees, Missy, she's a very honest young lady, she started shaking. She said, James, I think I've seen that creature myself. I was driving down Klickitat Canyon. So from Mount Adams, there are 2 main rivers that flow off of it. One is the White Salmon River, which is where Buck Creek is. So it's sort of like where the first experience was. And the other is the Klickitat River. And so they both flow off of Mount Adams and drain into the Columbia River. One is in the rainforest, one is in the desert. And she was driving there at sunrise, and she saw this enormous black cat walking near the side of the road. And she clearly remembers its long black tail, right? So big black cat, long black tail. She said it entered a small patch of tall grass. She stopped her car to observe it, and she waited for it to emerge. And after 5 minutes, she didn't see it come out of the other side. She got out of her car, found no evidence of it. She wondered if she should tell the people who had houses nearby that there's an enormous black cat predator nearby, but she thought they'd think she was crazy, so she didn't tell them. She did confide in her family. And to give you a sense of how big this creature is, they listened to her story and they said, Missy, you probably just saw a cow. All right. So imagine. So, first of all, a couple things going on there. One, a cat the size of a cow. That's phenomenal, right? Like, that's a gigantic creature.
That would frighten me instantly.
That
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is that you're talking about a grown woman and suggesting that she doesn't know the difference between a cat and a cow. Like,
Yep.
on its face, that's ridiculous. It's like if you saw a red Ferrari driving down the street, you told your buddies, hey, I saw a red Ferrari. They said, Ferraris are pretty rare. You probably saw a red minivan. You're like, hell no. I know the difference between a minivan and a Ferrari.
Right.
And so,
that's a good
and
That's my
you know,
dad.
it's interesting because so many times, like when I describe some of these stories to my own friends and family, they want to jump in and fill that unknown space with something that they know. It's a very common human defense mechanism. Like, we want the world to be normal. We don't want to deal with new information that readjusts how we have to operate in the world. So it's much easier to dismiss this as a cow or, swamp gas or a bear or something normal, so that we don't have to rebuild our entire map of reality. But what to me is more interesting is, like, what if you just let that information be and you don't instantly try to fill it with something that you already know? What will you discover if you allow that to be? So yeah. So
of that has to do with, like you were talking about the nuclear plant. Was any sightings around there?
Well, it's an interesting story that you bring that up because, so just to sort of give you the full picture of the reports, we now have had close to 60 reports of this.
Jeez, of that cat.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Good Lord.
What happened once I heard this friend of the family with very earnest and very believable story from my perspective, and Missy, who is someone who I trust and I know personally very, very well, and I know that she wasn't lying to me, I said, okay, well, this is something really interesting. And, honestly, it is so much fun. Like, every week, 2 or 3 Scooby-Doo mysteries walk through my front door.
You like Scooby-Doo mysteries?
My employees love it. Like, it's their favorite part of the job, right? When people come in with cool stories to tell. And so, of course, we have a radio advertising budget at the store. So I started putting out radio ads. Has anyone else seen this big black cat? And then I put up, some flyers at the local trailheads and started actively soliciting information, like, who has seen this thing? And so we have had over 60 reports. We've had senior law enforcement officials tell us that they've seen it. The reports seem to go back 30 or 40 years. There are no hostile encounters. We've had reports of a gentleman saw it in his driveway with a kitten, so a small baby, a big black cat with a small baby cat, so it seems to be reproducing. We've had hunters say they see it in their scopes. And there are certain areas that are more, we have more reports than others. A lot of the reports are pretty boring. I was driving my ATV, a giant black cat jumped across the trail, scared the shit out of me, and I never saw it again. And so that's not a person who's like seeking, fame or glory or anything else. They're just like, yeah, this crazy thing happened to me. There's several reports of people seeing it like leaping across the road in front of their car at night. And they say when its body is extended, it is the length of 2 lanes of traffic, right? So like an entire 2-lane road is the length of his body. When you look at the
that's a big cat. That's huge. That's not small. That's huge.
There is no living creature that matches this description.
No.
There is one creature in the fossil record that does, and it's called the Panthera atrox.
Damn it, Yodi beat me to it. James, damn you. All right, because I write down this question, man, and I was trying to work. I was waiting for the time to ask it, because what I was going to ask is, would there be a possibility? The first guy that told you the story, could there have been like a parallel slip? Because I really believe that happens with us when we're looking into the ghost stuff. Okay, I believe it happens probably more than spirit, and when that happens, he's looking at something that's prehistoric. You just went there. That was my question, but maybe this was something that was prehistoric. And what's in the cat record for your area? So now that you've said it,
So,
You beat me to it. Go for it.
well, you're smart. I mean, it's obvious. Of course, you'd come to that conclusion, right? So, the creature's called Panthera atrox. It supposedly went extinct 10,000 years ago, right about the time that the floods were flowing through the gorge,
Or
right?
did it?
This is
Yeah.
exactly right. So, this is at the Younger Dryas boundary. So there have been many, many species, especially down in the La Brea tar pits of Panthera atrox, also known as the American lion. It was the largest cat that has ever lived, and it measured 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. They said this creature
Shoo.
is easily over 1,000 pounds when it was existent. And interestingly, it had the largest cranial cavity, so largest brain of any cat that ever existed, both in sheer volume and volume as compared to its total body mass. So Panthera atrox is the only creature that matches it. So, as I'm looking at this, I'm like, wow, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Looked into some mythology around it. In the Great Lakes region by you, there's a Native American traditions about a race of supernatural panther protectors. They're called the Mishepeshu. And these are, my understanding is when Native Americans talk about things from the underwater realm or from the sky realm or from inside of the earth, they're talking about things that have a foot in both the physical realm and the spiritual realm or the etheric realm or something like that. So what's interesting about Mishepeshu, Black Panther creatures, known to be protectors, some descriptions describe them as a Black Panther with the face of a man. And I thought, very, very interesting. Here in Klickitat County, we have a number of petroglyphs, and right down by an area called Horse Thief Lake. And I think I've got a picture of this. Well, what's cool about these petroglyphs is there's one that looks like a cat, like a big cat with water lines underneath its head. Let's see if I can't bring this up here. I had to put on my glasses to check this out. All right. And so one theory is that it's a supernatural creature, right? Let's see if I can't find this. Yeah, here we go. So can you see my screen? So this is one of the petroglyphs. And what's interesting, it's got that cat-like face. It's got the water lines under its head. And then there's that crack going through the water lines. And, in some spiritual traditions, the image of the cat on the rock binds into the rock, but the crack releases it. And so we don't know if that may be part of what's going on here. So again, I'm trying to make sense of these things. The only big black cat in North America is a black jaguar, but their range is 1,000 miles south of here. So what could it possibly be? Well, a really interesting theory has to do with the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. So we talked about that a little bit earlier. It was the country's first top secret site. They're literally toying with the fabric of reality out there. So I did some research. Turns out they had a huge animal testing program out there. And from day one, and in fact, they were testing apex predators. So from the very beginning, the Manhattan Project was worried that the Nazis were going to unlock the secrets of the atom. And of course, everyone knows about the concerns about the bomb. But the Nazis were also highly interested in genetic manipulation, creating super soldiers and super animals. They had, I think it's a historic fact, that they brought back an Ice Age creature called the aurochs, which is this gigantic, hyper-aggressive bull through retrobreeding and all this other weird stuff that they were up to. And so back in the 40s, we didn't know what we know now about radiation, but we did know that radiation could induce mutations. And so the Allies are thinking, of course, we can't let them get the bomb, but what if they're doing genetic manipulation with radiation, right? So when they set up the Hanford site, they bring on a scientist from the University of Washington. His name is Dr. Loren Donaldson. His only academic achievement before receiving this post is creating a super animal. He created a thing called the Donaldson super trout. This is a fish that is 8 times larger and stronger than a normal trout. It reaches reproductive maturity in half the time. It can swim in salt water and fresh water, and it's super survivable, right? So this is the guy they picked to run the animal testing program as they're setting up the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. So he winds up, we win the war. The plutonium from Hanford fuels the first bomb, and the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki. Hanford gets revealed to the public, and then the Cold War immediately starts. The Russians are scooping up Nazi scientists. So we start scooping up Nazi scientists through Operation Paperclip. And so Donaldson winds up going to the South Pacific, and he's part of all that Bikini Atoll and Castle Bravo testing and all that crazy stuff that spawned the Godzilla myths and everything. He's at ground zero, and he's the government scientific mouthpiece for everything that's going on there. I could tell you tons of stories about him, but so he left a hole at Hanford. The guy that takes it over is a guy named Bill Baer. Bill Baer is a World War II veteran specializing in amphibious warfare, right? And so he takes over this animal testing program, and they eventually build such a large facility that they could house 1,000 large animals there at a time. Like, they are doing industrial scale testing. And much of what we know about radiation effects on health comes from this Hanford Animal Lab. Well, I found some oral histories by Bill Barr, 3 of them, in fact. He's dead now, but he describes how they were testing apex predators. And in one of the videos, he holds up this picture of the device they were using to irradiate alligators, right? So what the hell are they doing with alligators
yeah, right.
in Washington State? So the reports vary, but they had between 25 to 50 alligators at the site, and they're experimenting on them. One night, 6 of these alligators outsmart the scientists and escape from their pens and get into the Columbia River. So you've got 6 irradiated experimental apex predators swimming around in the Columbia. And so they send out these Army hunting teams. And for 6 months, from August to January, they're hunting for these things. And they only ever catch 4 of them, right? And so even now we get reports like Bill Baer in these oral reports says even in the 80s, they're getting reports of alligators in the river, and he's denying knowing anything about it. But some people have come to our store and they're canoeing or kayaking up closer to Hanford than we are. And they say that they've had things grab their kayaks and try to drag it under. And they never quite got a look at what it was that had grabbed onto their boat, but Jesus Christ, could have been one of these things. So,
my God, so, folks, now we know where Wally Gator came from. All right, now the mystery is solved.
Yeah,
and you're right. Jesus
Crazy.
Christ is right, man. If something's grabbing my kayak, I'm not going in that river.
So, and
my wife and I were just talking about megalodons. That's a whole nother show, but yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So, what does this have to do with big cats? Well, so right now, 1/4 of the U.S. nuclear stockpile is guarded by dolphins. And we've had a dolphin sentinel program since the 1950s.
Yep.
The reason is that dolphins are way more effective than sonar detecting scuba infiltrators. So if you've got a Soviet scuba diver, especially one rigged to swim at night, our sonar can't tell the difference between a Soviet scuba diver, a tuna, or a sea lion, but dolphins can. And so they've trained dolphins. And what I understand they do is they've got this special rig they put on their snout. It's got like a harpoon. And that dolphin identifies a diver, swims into him, tags him with that harpoon. It inflates a balloon, brings the diver to the surface. It sounds like a painful thing, but anyway. And then the Navy scoops him up and they interrogate this guy, right?
That's what he gets. Yeah.
So, but what's important is that from the 1950s, our government recognizes that animals are more effective sentinels for our most sensitive sites than humans are. In fact,
certainly.
At Hanford, they had 4 Nike missile launch sites. These are nuclear-tipped surface-to-air missiles.
Yep.
And each of those sites was guarded by dogs and they said that dogs were worth 10 human guards, right? 1 dog worth 10 human guards. So if you're a zealous cold warrior, you're going to ask yourself one simple question. Can we bring the dolphins to Hanford? The answer is no, because it's got 90 miles of river coastline, but it's fresh water. Dolphins only operate in salt water.
Yep.
So your next question is going to be, what is the world's most effective riverine hunter? And that answer is the jaguar. So the jaguars can hold their breath for 15 minutes. They can eat underwater. They can swim over 1 kilometer in the open ocean. They have night vision that's 6 times better than a human being. Pound for pound, they're the strongest of the big cats. And most interestingly,
they can take a man and carry him into a tree, guys.
Yeah, they always drag their prey to shore. Right. Yep. And so a Soviet scuba diver at the bottom of the Columbia River does you nothing. But if you have that infiltrator on shore, that's something you can do something with.
Yeah.
And so what we think happened was there was a Jaguar Sentinel program. It probably had some genetic mutations. One of the problems with jaguars is they are notoriously the hardest of the big cats to train. Obviously, lions, much easier. You see them in every circus, right?
Yep.
And so jaguars and lions can mate and produce viable offspring. In fact, in Canada right now, there was a jaguar and a lion living in captivity together. Apparently, they loved each other very much, and they had babies. And one of those babies came out to be basically a black-colored lion. Didn't have a big mane, but and the thing is freaking enormous, right? So if you look at that map behind me, you can see that if you go north, east, or south, you head deeper into the desert. But if you head west, you head into this incredibly abundant biosphere that's got lots of places to hide, plenty of habitat, lots of prey.
Yep.
And so what we think happened was there was a sentinel, a jaguar sentinel program, probably with some type of hybridization or super animal component to it. Just like the alligators, those creatures outsmarted the scientists. And just like the alligators, once they escaped, they couldn't recapture them.
Yeah.
And so then these creatures migrated from Benton County, which is the county east of us, into Klickitat County. And now here in the 2000s, we're living with this sort of ghost of the Cold War. These creatures that escaped from the atomic frontier back in the 1960s.
Yeah, and they can adapt and overcome. That's for sure.
That's terrifying.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
So you know what? You guys have fun in your river and going out in the woods out there. after hearing this show.
Not to make you feel bad, but my co-investigator is my 9-year-old daughter, and she can't wait to get out there and check it out.
Lord, yeah.
So I'm not saying
Bring
anything.
lots of guns.
I'm just saying.
Lots of guns. That's all I'm going to tell everybody.
No, I want to go out there. I really do.
Even with squatch hunting, James, I see these shows and I laugh like, well, he's aware that you're there before you know anything else, and you're setting up all these cameras and making all this noise. And like, who's the guy carrying a gun? Anybody got a gun? Because you can say he's docile or it's docile all you want. I want to tell you, I've never seen the face, okay, but Crystal's aware of this. I've had 2 things that I've seen that I'm pretty convinced in this area that I think, because we've had reports right here in Kalamazoo County, and you're not going to tell me that I didn't see it. And I've never seen anything so massive in my life. One was at a distance, so I couldn't make out the face. The second time was to my back. It had reddish brown hair. I've never seen shoulders. It was like the thickness of my car. It was so big, right? Yeah. All I'm going to say is once you see this, it changes your life. It changed me forever. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly right. Interestingly, in Skamania County, where my house is, since the 1960s, there have been laws on the books that if you hunt and kill Sasquatch here, you will go to jail and pay thousands of dollars in fines. Like laws here,
right?
And so, but
I just mean for self-defense. I didn't mean hunting it. Okay, let me qualify. You everybody hear me?
Don't be knocking on your door.
I didn't mean hunting. Okay, I meant just in case.
This is personal protection only.
Yeah, in
right?
case the black cougar thing shows up, or the 3-headed alligator that wants to drag me to the bottom of the river.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, what's amazing is like that Hanford place. I've talked to scientists who worked on biology programs there. There is actually a guy whose job it is to track nuclear bunny poop. So the bunnies, they hang out by the barrels of nuclear waste because they're warm. And they get irradiated, and then they scamper all over. It's a 600 square mile area, and then they leave their droppings, and the droppings are radioactive. But what's interesting is that those bunnies are prey for the coyotes and the wolves and the rattlesnakes.
And
this same scientist said that he has seen rattlesnakes with 3 eyes. I mean, like, there's some crazy stuff that is going on there. And thank God, like, the Apocalypse Forge is, 100 miles away from my store. And so we're not like, right at ground zero for that. And they've decommissioned it now and everything else. But, it's kind of to me a chicken and the egg question. Like, did that place come here because this is such a high strangeness place to begin with? Like, did like attract like, or is it just one of the things that adds on to the weirdness of this area?
I don't know, James. What you're doing is turning Washington into Australia. Everything there is weird and wants to kill you. That's what I'm hearing in this interview.
Well, there's what's interesting is we haven't had any hostile Bigfoot encounters, no hostile ape cat encounters.
Right.
And so like and you brought up a good point. Like, I am an old adventurer. I'm not what I would consider a great researcher or a scientist of any stripe. And the reason why I'm going on these interviews and talking to folks like you and your audience is that I would love for people who are better at researching or even more intuitive than I am to come out here to the gorge and see for themselves. The limits of what I'm doing is I can look for patterns, I can tell a story, I can communicate what we're seeing, I can draw some maps, and that kind of stuff. But I think that there are far more talented investigators, people who've been doing this for decades longer than I have. And, I'm inviting all these folks to come out here and see for themselves, because you get here, first of all, it is a magically enchanted landscape. And this is still living Earth. Like, Mount St. Helens erupted in the 1980s. Just last week there was earthquake activity on top of Mount Hood. In the 1500s, the town that I live on, there was a gigantic landslide where Lewis and Clark encountered that actually dammed the river. And so, there are things that this is still one of the last places in the world that the land is still alive and the landscape is enchanted. There are things that are happening out here that are astounding and incredible and wondrous. And, for me, it's a joy to live here. It's a joy that I won the lottery and had a good job and the ability to move my family here. But my God, this is an adventurer's paradise, and it's a paranormal investigator's treasure chest. And I just hope anyone out there who's hearing this message, who's a good investigator or an intuitive spiritual person, will come here and help us understand some of these mysteries out here, because there are some just astonishing things.
It sounds like it, because it hasn't been subjugated into so much humanity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's still wild.
And thank God it's protected. As a national scenic area, there's development that will never happen here. There are scenic vistas that will never be defiled. Excellent. And there are still wild, rugged, wondrous places here.
Man, Crystal mentioned before we started the show that, man, if I could afford the trip, I'd come out and visit you. Now I definitely want to.
Well, if you come out, send me a message, because I will take you to the hot spots.
I promise. I'll come. I won't stay with you. I'm kind of inviting myself into your house, but we'll stay near. We'll stay nearby. The thing, what I meant to say was that I probably would be crazy enough to go looking for the alligators and the stuff you just outlined, just because that's what I'm into. When I went to school in Tucson, which the closest I could get to it being wild out there was leaving town. And we would go up to, the mountains, Mount Rincon, would go up to Mount Lemmon, all of them. And basically we would freeform climb. We would try to do the stuff naturally. Of course, wait for winter, because rattlesnakes are not real friendly in spring, summer, or cactus. But the point was, I felt myself like you when I was younger, that I just wanted to see things. And we saw some odd things in the sky out there, felt some weird things on Mount Lemmon. I would love it out there. I really would. I even though I've got a little motation issues, I could get by, and I definitely would have just the greatest time, man. Golly.
I got, so once this started kicking off, I got myself an FJ Cruiser 4x4, and now it's all tricked out with cameras and spotlights.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
My daughter loves it when I drop her off at school, that thing. But anyway, she's like, my 9-year-old daughter is my co-investigator. So we head out on all these missions and we call it the cryptid.
You know what? You're starting a legacy, James. Really you are. You're starting a legacy. And I'm a Jeep guy, so I did that with my Jeeps, but I Ghostbuster them out instead. But
nice.
I talked about getting one of yours, and I've been eyeballing them, but I can't afford it. But I think at
Mhm.
some point when I finally decide to step away, I'm going to revert the Jeep back, the Commander I've got back into a lot of
Oh, nice.
that. Yeah, we're a Jeep family,
Classic.
and I
I had
definitely
I had a
would
Wrangler
go out
back
that
in the
way.
day. I loved it.
That's what Eve
Absolutely
has.
loved
My
it.
wife's got a 97. I love it. Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, very cool.
You
Okay,
are
so
so
since we're talking
passionate.
about it, I got to show you.
He is,
There's
isn't
the
he?
He's so
cryptid for you.
passionate and
He
full
is
of
a great
energy.
guest. James is a great guest. He's passionate about what he's doing. I'm digging
And I'm a
this.
desert girl. I love the desert.
Yeah.
So
You're good. You would love it here, yeah. So, anyway, yeah, there's my rig, the cryptid. So, anyway,
Wow.
but yeah, well, I've taken up more time than you've generously offered me. So,
If I had more time, we could go hours. We got to have you back. So make sure that we stay in touch via Facebook or whatever you prefer.
yeah.
And thanks for being here, because I got more I'd love to share with the audience and talk with you. And my group's the Southern Michigan Paranormals. So we kind of are more on the spirit side of things of what we do, but I'm into UFOs, cryptids, as you can tell.
Mhm.
I know you brought up, the Ojibwa creature, the underwater, basically the
Yeah.
Great Lynx. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was having a conversation about that not too long ago either, because
Yeah.
people are trying to connect that to the dog man thing now, thinking that, well, maybe it's not a dog, maybe it's this thing, maybe it's
Yeah.
that thing. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, I encourage folks to check out our website. We've got a lot of pictures of the stuff.
Tell
So
them where they can find you.
margiesoutdoorstore.com. And so margiesoutdoorstore.com. And if you hit the paranormal tab or you read through, we've got a gallery of many of the things that we've talked about here today, including Click It Ted Ape Cat, some of the orbs, all that stuff. We've got and you can also staff@margiesoutdoorstore.com is a great email address if you want to get a hold of me. And so that's one that we monitor for folks who are interested in doing interviews or, want to connect with me personally. So yeah, and then if you get out here, you can also hit margiesoutdoorstore.com and file a paranormal report if you have a weird experience. But definitely come into the store, because we're located in Bingen, Washington, about an hour east of Portland. The nearest town that many people have heard of would be Hood River, Oregon, and there's a bridge, the Hood River Bridge, and we are right across the bridge from Hood River. But yeah, come on out, check it out, see for yourself, because it is a wonderland.
Do you have a book? You have a book, don't you?
Well, what we've got, we got all these reports, and people were saying, well, James, what are you learning? So I started to put together what we call arcane adventure maps. So you can see how much I love drawing maps. Well, these are maps of some of the paranormal hotspots with excerpts from some of the reports and local legends and lore, directions on how to get to these places, some of the information about, paranormal investigation, that kind of stuff. So we've got two right now, and we're working on more. We've got apparitions among the ancient monoliths, which focuses on that Beacon Rock area where we looked at those glowing orbs. And then we've got Mysterious Beasts and the Mystic Mesa, which focuses on Horse Thief Butte, which is sort of this amazing desert mesa. Looks like a normal mesa from the road, but when you get into it, it's riddled with hidden canyons and a maze of amphitheaters and petroglyphs. And it's right, and you can climb on top of it, and you can see the expanse of the river. We've had reports of small humanoids out there, lots of crazy stuff. It's obviously a place of great spiritual power. So those are the two sort of like little guides you can get. It's basically come into the store, you get this thing for $10, and it's a weekend's worth of adventure in a paranormal hotspot.
Okay.
So I'm gonna call this one part 1, James, and when we have it back, it'll be part 2, because I want to talk about the little people. If you like coming back, I hope you enjoyed your time here.
Of course,
because I know what you're talking about with your little folks, because there was a connection with a friend of mine, Chris, out east here, and they dealt with a Native American thing that's been going on for years, and I think there's been reports of some people seeing them too, called the puck wedgies. And they're supposed to be very similar. So they're like men or women or small humans, and they're tiny, but they're almost like gremlins. They're so malicious, and they play tricks and they do things. And then I heard somebody on a show make a connection to what you brought up. So when you're on for part 2, we'll have James back. Everybody, I promise, everybody out there in paranormal land, when you see this on, YouTube and our network, you can also catch the show. I will mention on our network is www.unrestrictedparanormal.com. And the video will be up there for you to watch it. Your discretion at whatever time you want to watch. Sit back on the couch, put a bag of Cheetos on your belly, sit back and watch. You do what you want to do. Hey, it's free. It's America, man. You do what you want to do. But I appreciate everybody.
Ticket and go see James.
Get your plane ticket. Go see James, and please go check out his web page there in the store. And I mean it, man. If I'm able to come up with some money, that's road trip.
I love it.
I would go out. I'd go out west anytime.
Totally worth it. Love to see you.
All right, my friend. Let's stay in touch. And if anything, we're working on some merch and some things. If you guys got stickers or patches or anything, if you got stickers, send me sticker. I need sticker intervention on my car, James. The back window of my Ecto is loaded with stickers. YouTube channels. Yeah, send me some stuff, man. And I will talk about you. And then when we do Ghostorama, and it's a long drive for you, I would never ask you to come all the way to Michigan for Ghostorama, but it would be cool to do something like this where we could have you on as a guest. And because we are streaming on StreamYard, I could have you come on and do a presentation to the people to where they would see you and you could hear the people, maybe a two-way cam thing like we're doing here. I never thought of that before, but that would be cool. And we could bring you. We could bring you into Ghostorama, which is a paranormal meet and greet. And I know those groups would love to talk to you and hear you.
That'd be a lot of fun. We're thinking about putting on a big festival here in the Gorge, a paranormal, series of events and shows and talks and stuff like that too. So I know you can do it. I know you can do it, man. You got the drive. He is passionate. And look at that map. I am starstruck. That map is awesome. Well, we'll chat afterwards. You'll send me your address and we'll get you a copy.
Absolutely, my friend. You have a good night, good weekend. And we will see you next time here on Paranormal Now. And remember, everybody, you can come see us at Frankenfest in East Lansing, Michigan. That's from 11 to 7. That's this Saturday. We're talking at 12, doing the first lecture. And then I and Crystal are leading the after hours ghost tour of the Haunted Mansion. So come on out and have a good time. Yeah, Turner Dodge. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Dan and Crystal.
No worries. Keep your eyes to the sky, and everybody, happy haunting.
Bye-bye.